The first time I saw my husband again after he walked out on me, he was standing in the rain outside my office, gripping the handle of a cheap black umbrella like it might keep his whole life from falling apart. Mark had once worn Italian shoes and laughed like a man who believed the world owed him something. That day, 6 months after he left me for his two-year-old secretary, he looked like a stranger who had been chewing on regret for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. He stared up at the glass tower in downtown Chicago where I worked now, not because I'd always worked there, but because my name was on the building. "Elaine," he said when security finally let him into the lobby, his voice thin and desperate. "Please, just 5 minutes." I stood at the top of the marble staircase in a charcoal suit, holding a folder to my chest, and for 1 second I almost laughed. 5 minutes. That was all he thought he needed to undo 6 months of cruelty, humiliation, and betrayal. 6 months earlier, he had left our home with a duffel bag, a new haircut, and a girl young enough to call me ma'am. Before he shut the door behind him, he told me I was too plain, too careful, too easy to forget. He told me Chloe had spark, and that she understood him in ways I never did. Then he looked me dead in the eye and said the words that still burned in my ears. "You'll be fine. You've always had nothing but yourself." Nothing. That was what he thought I had. So when I saw him standing there, soaked from the rain, staring up at the very company he had once swore he helped build, I knew this wasn't just a visit. It was a surrender. I should tell you who I was before that day. My name is Elaine Mercer, and for 12 years I was the wife of a man who loved being admired more than he loved being honest. Mark was charming in the beginning. He had one of those polished smiles that made people lean in when he spoke. He knew how to make a room laugh, how to make waitresses remember his name, how to make a woman feel like she was the only person he was looking at. When we met, I was working in accounting for Mercer Logistics, the company my Aunt Ruth had built from a 2-truck operation into one of the most respected shipping firms in the Midwest. I wasn't born into money, despite what people liked to assume. My mother died when I was young. My father left when I was barely out of high school, and Aunt Ruth was the one who stepped in. She taught me how to balance books, read contracts, and never confuse kindness with weakness. Mark came in as a regional sales manager. He was good at his job. Too good, at first. He could walk into a room full of skeptical clients and walk out with signatures. He made people feel like they were being chosen. I fell for that. Hard. At first, he was attentive in the way all bad decisions are. He brought me coffee when I worked late. He remembered my favorite pie. He listened when I talked about my aunt's business and told me I was sharper than anyone else in the office. He said he admired women who could hold a company together without making a spectacle of themselves. That should have been my first warning, because what he admired, he also wanted to control. After we married, he slowly started acting like the company was his, like the success around us was proof he had earned the right to speak for me. He began stepping into meetings that had nothing to do with him. He started making promises to clients before checking the numbers. He told people he was helping manage the future of Mercer Logistics. Aunt Ruth didn't like it, but she tolerated him because I asked her to. I thought marriage meant building something side by side. Then Chloe arrived. She was 22, with perfect hair, bright lipstick, and the kind of polite laugh that made older men feel younger. She started as Mark's assistant. At first, I barely noticed her. Then I noticed the long lunches, the private jokes, the sudden need to stay late after work, the way his phone turned face down whenever I entered the room. When I asked him about it, he called me paranoid. "You're always looking for problems," he said one night while loosening his tie in our kitchen. "Chloe is efficient. That's all. But efficiency does not text a married man at midnight. Efficiency does not leave little notes in his jacket pocket. Efficiency does not wear perfume strong enough to follow him home." Still, I stayed quiet. I told myself not to embarrass him, not to create drama, not to become one of those wives who ruins her own marriage by asking too many questions. My aunt used to say, "Silence can be a weapon, but only if you know when to use it." I didn't know yet. The night Mark left, we were supposed to be celebrating our 12th anniversary at a restaurant on Michigan Avenue. I wore a navy dress, he once told me, brought out my eyes. He was late, then later, then not coming. The waiter kept checking on me with polite concern while I watched my wine go untouched. Then my phone rang. Not Mark. A text from Chloe. "Just so you know, he's with me now." That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just a message that turned my entire body cold. I drove home in a fog and found him in our bedroom with 2 suitcases open on the bed. He didn't even look ashamed. That was the part that stunned me most. He looked relieved. "I'm done pretending," he said. "I want something real." "Real?" I asked, my voice shaking. "You're leaving me for the secretary?" He sighed like I was making him tired. "Don't make this ugly, Elaine. Chloe sees the man I could still become. You see the man I used to be." I stared at him. "And what exactly am I supposed to be seeing right now?" He picked up his watch, slid it onto his wrist, and said, "You'll be fine. You've always had nothing but yourself." Then he walked out. The next morning, I woke to find our joint account drained of almost everything except what the bank could legally hold until the divorce paperwork was filed. He'd also taken the new SUV, half the designer clothes he'd bought me, and, more insulting than any of it, the silver cufflinks my aunt had given him on our wedding day. He really thought he was leaving me with nothing. He didn't know Aunt Ruth had been waiting for this. She called me 2 days later and told me to meet her lawyer. I thought she wanted to comfort me. Instead, she handed me a sealed envelope and said, "You've been patient long enough." Inside was a letter from her and revised ownership documents for Mercer Logistics. Years earlier, she had quietly placed a controlling share of the company in a trust in my name. Not Mark's, mine. She had always suspected he was more interested in the Mercer name than in me. She never said it directly because she wanted to see what he would do when he thought I had no power. I laughed when the lawyer explained it, because if I hadn't, I might have cried. Aunt Ruth gave me one more gift before her health began to fail. She told me to stop apologizing for surviving, so I did. I took over the finance side first, then operations, then the board meetings Mark used to swagger into like he belonged there. He had officially resigned from the company the same day he left me, which meant he had no legal claim to anything. I froze the access he still had. I audited the client files, and what I found made the betrayal even uglier. Mark had been copying internal pricing proposals and sending them to a brand new consulting firm he'd opened with Chloe. He thought he was clever. He thought he could take our clients, our methods, and our name, then build a polished little life on the ashes of mine. For a few weeks, it almost worked. He posted photos online of expensive dinners, rooftop drinks, and Chloe in expensive dresses. He used words like independent and fresh start. Friends who used to invite us to dinner suddenly stopped calling me. His mother, who had always acted like I was lucky he chose me, sent a card that said, "Sometimes men need room to grow." I threw it in the trash without reading the rest. Then the money problem started. The consulting firm was built on lies, and lies do not keep rent paid or payroll covered. Their biggest client pulled out after discovering Mark had promised services his company couldn't deliver. Then a second client left. Then a third. Chloe, who loved the picture of success, did not love the reality of debt. She posted one last picture of a cocktail with the caption, "New chapter," and vanished from his apartment a week later. I didn't learn that from Mark. I learned it from the frantic voicemail he left my office assistant 3 months later. By then, Aunt Ruth had passed, and the board had voted me in as CEO. That was the day the real twist hit the headlines, at least in our little business world. People who had ignored me for years suddenly wanted lunch. Former clients suddenly remembered my name. Even Mark's mother started calling my assistant to check in. It was pathetic, but the deeper twist came from the lawyer. Aunt Ruth had one last clause in the trust. If a family member or spouse resigned under dishonesty, abandonment, or misuse of company assets, they could not be rehired in any executive or managerial role without unanimous board approval. In plain English, Mark had burned every bridge before he realized I owned the road. That rainy afternoon in the lobby, he was there because he had run out of roads. I came down the stairs slowly and stopped in front of him. Security stood nearby, but I waved them back. I wanted to hear this myself. His eyes flicked over my suit, my clipboard, my badge, the polished office around us. I could see him doing the math in his head. I could see the panic when he realized I wasn't the woman he had walked away from. "Elaine," he said again, softer this time, I made a mistake. I let that sit between us for a moment. You made several. He swallowed hard. I know. I know I did. But I need a job. Any job, sales, operations, whatever you can offer. I can fix things here. I know the clients. I know the market. I can help you. I looked at him for a long second. This was the same man who had told me I was nothing. The same man who had left me sitting alone at our anniversary table. The same man who had chosen a two-year-old with an office smile over a marriage built on 12 years of loyalty. You want me to rehire you? I asked. He nodded too quickly, like the answer mattered more than dignity. Please. I stepped closer, just enough for him to feel the difference in height between where he was and where I stood. You didn't leave because you wanted freedom, Mark, I said. You left because you thought I was small. You thought I would collapse quietly while you chased a younger fantasy and called it a future. But the moment you walked out, I stopped being your wife and became your mistake. His face tightened. That's not fair. I almost smiled at that. Fair? He looked around the lobby as if someone might rescue him. No one did. I was under pressure, he muttered. Everything got complicated. No, I said. You made it simple. You took loyalty and traded it for ego. You took a good life and gambled it on attention. You took secrets that didn't belong to you and tried to sell them like they were yours. His mouth opened, then closed. I reached into the folder I was carrying and pulled out a single page. This is a summary of the client theft, the false promises, and the terms of your resignation. I could send this to the company's attorneys right now. I could also call the state board and let them ask why your firm used Mercer pricing data without permission. He stared at the paper like it had teeth. But I didn't, I said. He looked up, hope flashing across his face so fast it almost made me pity him. I let him have that hope for exactly 1 second. I didn't send it because I wanted to see whether you would come here to apologize or to survive. You came here to survive, he whispered. Elaine. I shook my head. No, you don't get to use my name like we're still married. You don't get my mercy after you spent months treating my love like a weakness. He stood there, trembling just enough to show me he understood at last. Security stepped forward, but I raised my hand. One more thing. Mark looked at me, desperate and pale. You said I had nothing, I told him. That was your biggest mistake, because I had something you never valued. I had discipline. I had truth. I had the trust of people who actually deserved my loyalty. And I had Aunt Ruth's faith in me, which turned out to be worth more than everything you ever promised. He lowered his head. I said, You're not getting rehired. The words landed quietly, but I saw them hit him like a collapse. Then I added, You are, however, welcome to read the notice my attorneys will send you this afternoon. His face changed immediately. What notice? The one that explains you'll be paying back what you took, plus penalties. The one that says your consulting license review is now pending. The one that lists the clients you misled and the records you altered. He stared at me in horror. I took a slow breath and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not revenge. Not rage. Peace. Because karma, I've learned, doesn't always arrive with fire. Sometimes it arrives in a crisp envelope. A board decision. A denied request. And a woman who no longer trembles when her name is spoken by the man who broke her heart. Mark opened his mouth again, but no words came out. I nodded toward the doors. You can leave now. Security stepped in. He didn't resist. He just stood there for a moment, looking at me like he was trying to find the woman he had underestimated and couldn't recognize her anymore. Outside, the rain had stopped. He walked out of my building with his shoulders hunched and his pride in pieces. I watched him go through the glass wall of the lobby until he disappeared into the city. Then I turned around, walked back to my office, and took the call from the board chair about the new expansion proposal. I approved the hiring of 3 women returning to work after long breaks. I signed the donation to the Women's Scholarship Fund Aunt Ruth had always wanted. I opened the window and let the spring air into a room that, for the first time in years, felt like mine. A month later, I heard Mark had gone back to his mother's house. Chloe never came back. The consulting firm dissolved. The debt followed him everywhere. Last I heard, He was trying to rebuild his life one small piece at a time, the hard way, the honest way, the way he should have chosen before he decided love was disposable. As for me, I didn't need him to regret what he did. I had something better. I had my name on the building. I had my aunt's legacy. I had my own reflection in the window. And for the first time in a very long time, I liked the woman looking back at me. He left me for a girl and thought he was trading up. In the end, he begged the woman he abandoned to give him back a piece of the life he destroyed. And I didn't. That was the moment I understood the most satisfying kind of justice. It is not loud. It is not messy. It is simply this. The person who broke you comes back asking for a place in the world you built without them. And you finally know how to say no.